Hey legends, welcome to the off-season Chinwag on Celtic Down Under. I'm your host Jared, and joining me are Ian and John. How you going, Johnny?
I'm good, Jared. Yeah, good. Nicer pace, I guess, for us during the off season. Just that really awful period where it's just rumours and speculation, and no actual decent games to watch. And yeah, so it's all just rumours, transfer rumours, all that sort of stuff. So can't wait for the season to start again.
And how you going, Ian?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. It's much the same as Johnny there. It's just waiting for this countdown the minutes to the. I suppose the season starts proper. We've got a couple of friendlies coming up, so that'll keep us ticking over and getting us to looking at some of the youth players that are coming through. And we just saw that against Queens Park, but yeah, looking with and hoping with fingers crossed that we're going to make some decent signings.
Yeah, well, that's what we'll talk about tonight. We're going to focus on the transfers in and out of the club, what work we still think needs to be done, and then just have a bit of a chat as you said there, about the friendlies and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a quick chat. I don't know, could go 20 minutes, could go 45, could go an hour. Who knows? Depends how much we waffle on. And that's for you, Shane, if you're tuning in about talking about waffling here. So it's going to be an interesting one. So I was having a look at the Celtic squad just before we came on air, right? And I accidentally just shut it down. But there's plenty of work that needs to happen. And I think we'd all be of agreement that at the end of the day, we need to do a hell of a lot more in terms of top end talent. Brendan always talks about wanting power and pace and quality. There, he's like buzzwords anytime you ask him about signings, right? And I'm just looking at the squad, and I would have thought if we kept everyone, we'd probably only need 3 or 4 top level players added to the squad, and that's it. And we've already brought in 5 players, and that's the confronting thing to me that's jumped off the page straight away. So I've heard some interesting takes on other pods and that myself. So what I want to do is I want to get your thoughts, Ian, on what's your just general. We won't get into any specifics right now, but just a general feeling on how you think the transfer window's going so far. And then we'll go to you off the back of that, Johnny.
Okay, well, I think so far, I don't think any of these signings seem to be Brendan Rodgers signings. They seem to be. I mean, what is really constitutes for a Brendan Rodgers signing? You know, I think this is maybe his Rolodex. He's got his contacts. He's got great contacts within the game. He started out with Chelsea, obviously their youth team and stuff like that. So his contact book must be great. I think that's how we ended up getting Ida ultimately. But at the moment, pretty underwhelming. Tidsdale, this is his first real sort of time proper that we're actually going to hopefully see the prescriptions that he's dishing out, being the football doctor. I hope they're good ones. So that remains to be seen. But I think ultimately it's what the board think and do, and I don't think they're ever going to change. I think year on year. I mean, I was watching Celtic Down Under. Sorry, not Celtic Down Under. The Huddle Breakdown and the Celtic Underground collaboration the other day, and they were saying about the likes of Ida. I think we all knew it. Ida had a clause, or not a clause, sorry, an agreement to go to an Italian team for about 3 million. And obviously had a purple patch at Celtic, and we waited and waited and waited, and the price went up and up and up. I think similarly with Engels, I think there was a deal in place for him to come for about 6 million, and Desmond, sort of the sort of slight businessman that he is, trying to drive a hard bargain or a deal, despite the fact he's the buying club, waited until the last knock-ins, and then when the price almost doubled for Engels. So that's not either the players' faults. It's not Brendan Rodgers' fault. He identifies the players, and then it's up to the powers that be to go and get those things. So I just think that history repeats itself every season. We say, oh no, it can't happen this year. They'll change, and we never see the change. And I think that will certainly drive Brendan Rodgers' decision to move on to pastures new. I think if the club really backed him and showed that intent, because he's come back for Europe, hasn't he? He's not come back to play in the Scottish League. If he's a Premier League manager, he's going to stay in the Premier League, or he's going to go abroad. So I think without that pull of Celtic being kind of his club, and want to sort of come back and have a bit of redemption in the eyes of a lot of fans. Europe's a massive carrot for him, and that's obviously in a selfish aspect as well. He's gonna enhance his reputation if he does well at a club like Celtic and go when we get a bigger job in Europe, maybe in Spain. So, but he can't do that if he's not backed. And I think again the board will be, I think, reticent to go and just spend money that they think they don't need to. We'll talk really later in the pod about the threat from the other side of the city, which I think is kind of clear and present and tangible. I think for the first time since they were founded in 2012, they've got some people who actually know how to run a business. They know how to, that it's not going to be soft loans. They're going to, might be a slow burner, but ultimately they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Maybe not this season, but certainly from next season, when they get a bit of stability, and if their new manager does all right, then I think they're on sound footing. And if it coincides with us losing Rodgers, that perfect storm's going to happen, where we could be not winning the league for a few years.
We'll pump our brakes on that a little bit there, and we'll get into the whole Rodgers situation in a little bit down the road. But Johnny, how are you feeling at the moment with the transfer window?
Yeah, I think much like Ian, to be honest, I'm a bit underwhelmed so far, I have to say. I think the Swedish winger Nygren, encouraging, definitely an area we needed to buy in. I guess still somewhat of a question mark. I much like all Celtic signings. I think we're never going to get this high accolade, up and coming youngster that is very well known. They're Premiership teams, La Liga teams, even Bundesliga teams. They're all going to pick those type of players up. We're never going to be able to, even like Championship sometimes, they're going to pull those types of players in. What we're going to always try to bring in is a sort of a rough diamond, somebody that we can develop. Definitely we can see the right type of attributes, and then we can sort of get into that superstar level. So I'm not really bothered if it's a name or not. I just want us to purchase in the right areas. I think at this point though, apart from the Kieran Tierney, which easiest thing we've ever done, I guess. There's no needing to sell Celtic to KT. He was always going to do something like that. I mean, I'm not super surprised that he's gone away. He's done well in other leagues, and now he's always in his head said, "I'll try and come back if the time's right." So that's a fantastic piece of business for us, but not super surprising. I guess it's the everything else that doesn't at this moment bring me. Like maybe joy's the wrong word, but I think we need to get going. I think we are still dragging our heels. And I think this is what Ian was kind of alluding to with like backing Rodgers sort of stuff. It always seems to be that our board needs to take everything so tactically. It has to be the exact right purchase. Or this is all speculation, or it seems to be we have a list of targets and we just cannot seem to get them over the line. And it's, okay, not A, but B. Okay, not B, but C. Okay, not C, but D. And it slowly gets it grates on us as fans. It's just this, we can see where we need to purchase. I don't understand the slowness of our board and our recruitment team. So yeah, like at this point, still super early days, but I was really sick of the first Rodgers era where all of our business was done within the last 12 hours, 24 hours. Like that was horrid. And then it became loans and just whoever we could get. I really, really disliked that. And at least Ange kind of got business done really quickly and then sort of settled and didn't really do much towards the end. And I would prefer that, but different styles, I guess. So underwhelming so far, but we'll just have to see if it is decent or not.
Yeah, so the thing for me is what I'm finding strange about it, and you guys have touched on it, is it's not the players. It's everything around it that's what's driving me insane. And I'm not trying to, like, perfect example, Danny Boy here is saying, what's the definition of insanity? Yeah, we all know that one. But leaving it till the last minute, that's the tough part. 'Cause if we've got Champions League qualifiers this year, so it's you kind of want to get your players in now to bed them in for the qualifiers, which are like games 6 and 7 of the season, and then off you go, right? And that's not it for me. Like I'm looking at it going, and I heard this on, I think it was on Axom or one of the others, that looks like there's a 2-tier transfer system. Like Rodgers' first window, how much of a nightmare was that, right? And that was all based on club signings because Rodgers was only in the door late. Last year, we got some signings, but it was still dicked around with things and got guys in late and overpaid for a couple of players in Eder and Engels. So at the end of the day, I think we'll get the players we need, but I think we're just going to get the squad fillers and the depth signings and the ones the club's been scouting for a few windows now, and then we'll get the players we want at a later date when the time's right. Hopefully before the Champions League qualifies. But say we qualify, then the club will be like, okay, now we'll bring a couple of guys in on loan, or we'll get someone later on who's suddenly become available because their team needs to cut numbers for their squad, and that's when we'll get a few. But it just drives me insane. Like forward playing, like looking at the current squad, we've had 5 ins: Ross Doohan, KT, Benjamin Nigren, Callum Osmond, Diardo Inamura. So Inamura is what, a 5'10" left-sided centre half / left back. Is he the backup for KT? Is KT going to play left back or is KT going to play left centre back? Who knows? Nigger and Johnny early on, you mentioned he's a winger. If you look at his heat charts and everything, he plays more in the 10. He's more the Matt O'Reilly replacement. So if you look at it on that front, the team's a bit all over the place. Like Doohan is covered off for Bain. That's fine. Osmond comes in as our third string striker. Cool. Sorted. But I still think the big issues for us are we have, the Rodgers first stint. I have 400 wingers. That old joke. But at the moment, he's got 4,500 centre backs, and he's got no wingers. So there's going to be quite a bit of work to be done to the squad. And yeah, I'm not trying to drum up any issues. I'm just looking at it going, this is confusing. And then the flow-on effects to that lead to, as you guys are touching on, are these Rodgers signings? No. When will we get the Rodgers signings? Late in the window. Will Brendan Rodgers want to stick around if things don't change? Or is this, him waiting to get back properly before he pushes, before, he signs a new deal? Who knows? So there's a whole range of situations playing around here. But what I'll do is I'll get some comments up and then we'll dive into the whole, is Rodgers going to stick around on that side of it? And then we'll get into the actual ins and outs a little bit more and go from there. So, yeah, we'll just scroll through it here. We've got one here from Heavy Vibes saying how boys can't wait till the footy starts for real. McLaughlin saying I could easily go berserk, but I'll be patient now. Andrew Galea is saying, why do we recruit players the manager doesn't want? The Japanese centre-back is one, as is Tilio, he's never going to be looked at. And that's the concern to me. Like, you bring in players from Japan, like Awada, and look at the way Brendan was towards Kyogo, and then you have a look at Kobayashi before him. These guys got better pedigree coming out of Japan, and they've all been moved on. So, could be an interesting one. Maddie is saying, I reckon there's going to be a surprise or two to come. Ian Roy is saying, we'll be fine. I ain't one for panicking over signings. Heavy Vibes. Here we go. Power, pace. Any of these signings over 6 foot? Maybe Ross Doohan, the goalkeeper. That's about it. So McLaughlin's saying, so far I'm underwhelmed. This isn't doing us any favours if the board's wanting to keep Brendan Rodgers beyond the summer. And we'll jump off the back of that, Ian. So you put it in the chat, one of the chats early on, that is Rodgers wanting to see if he's going to be backed before he signs on again. What are your thoughts on that? Because for me, I'm thinking they're playing a bit of you move me, I'll move sort of thing the board and him are having a standoff at the moment?
I think it's it's the way it is. I think maybe when Brendan came back, I think the board kind of played on the fact that we'd had some successful signings under Ange, but I think Ange was an anomaly. I think we'd come off the back of not winning the 10. We were in disarray, and who could have predicted the unknown Ange to us at the time coming in, and revamping the squad so quickly. But it was all with players that he knew and trusted, or knew he could get a tune out of from a market that we didn't know or understand. So I think on the back of that was highly successful. We didn't want to lose Ange, but he wanted to go. So I think that was one of the major selling points to Brendan Rodgers, because I think the reason he left the last time was largely because of the board's indifference to his ambition. So he said that when he came back, he's like, he felt confident. Everyone was sort of singing the right tune to him in order to entice him back. And then quickly when he came back, it seemed like he wasn't the players that he signed. I mean, look at Lagerbielke, classic example. He was never a Brendan Rodgers signing, and Brendan just did not fancy him from the start. Never seen again. Look at Naroki. So apparently Lagerbielke had the same agent as Starfelt. So that 1 in 1 out. So that's not a way to for a club the size of Celtic to run their recruitment. But we've done it forever. I remember that Israeli agent that we got a few decent players from him, but it was like half the team used to come from him. So that's not impartial advice. That's someone who's got skin in the game to try and make some bucks for themselves. I've got a feeling that Brendan's already going to go. I think if it were going to extend, then it would have been done by now, and it should have been done by now. Brendan would have been confident that he was going to be backed this summer in order to make more of an impact in Europe. But I think the fact that we're only sort of whiskers away from getting into extra time, not actually to winning, but getting to extra time against Bayern Munich, I think that's not enough for the board to sort of say, well, why spend all this money when that's as far as we're going to go? I don't think that's. I think and that's why we're not investing for the qualifiers. I just think that the way they do it is just enough. And I think I used that analogy before. I think it's an often used analogy, but it's quite apt. But remember Nokia phones, for those of you who are old enough to remember, they were the only show in town. They had probably 90% of the market share and didn't take smartphones seriously. And then obviously they became, like, I think it's a similar thing happened to Kodak cameras as well. So we're in danger of being asleep at the wheel and being usurped by the new challenges. And that's not just the Rangers. It's going to be Hearts. They've got Tony Bloom now. They've got money. I think that's probably going to be more of a serious threat. And we've also got Hibs, Bill Foley at Hibs, who's he's done pretty well at Bournemouth, and he's got that franchise over here as well, Auckland FC. So there's a few things that the board need to sort of take seriously. But back in Brendan and matching his ambition, I don't see it happening. So that's sadly, I think, what's going to play out, and we'll lose Brendan at the end of the season, and that means do we just start from scratch again? Have we got a succession plan? Have we got an idea of who we're going to go get to follow on from Brendan? I think it was Harry Brady was saying on that podcast. I think he said he interviewed Peter Lawwell some years ago, and he said, as a bit of analysis, which I'd never thought of before, but really worked. He says the past good few managers that we've sort of paid good money for from the EPL or whatever, they've been a success. So you go back to Martin O'Neill, paid the money, got good success. Gordon Strachan was pretty successful, paid the money, got sort of decent success. This is in Europe and doing right. Then obviously we went for it was Mowbray. Mowbray wasn't a success. He did all right at Hibs, but he wasn't an established bigger name manager that had done it down south. That was a disaster. And then we got Ronnie, again, another disaster. So we didn't invest. So those two managers that we didn't invest in weren't successful. And then we went and got Brendan after Lennon. And it was marked in terms of the success that we got. Maybe not so much in Europe, but he pulled us right back up again. So when the board do take it seriously and invest, we get the results. But I think they quickly rest on the laurels and going back to eating their fagua and roast peacock and forget take their eye off the prize.
Yeah, makes sense. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Cool. Yeah, I just had a problem with my mic, so I had to do a changeover. But yeah, just on that, we'll speak about the centre back situations there, Johnny. But like Naroski has gone out on loan to Hanover 96 in Germany with a loan with an option to buy. You've got the only two players we currently have on loan are Naroski and Home. Apparently, we currently have Lagerbelka has been spotted in Braga gear, and Welsh is going to apparently be leaving as well. So that's going to clear up some of the centre back issues. But like looking at the squad, Johnny, like, do you think there's anyone who's going to surprise us this season and jump in and Brendan will give a chance? Like, there's a question here from Maddie saying, do you fellas reckon Tilio will get a crack this season? Like, is there anyone like a him or one for Robert Gibson, who I've seen in the comments as well? His mate Palmer's back at the club. Is there anyone that's going to step up, or you think Brendan's marked a bunch of their cards?
Look, I think, look, if I'm taking Brendan's comments recently about giving youth a go or an opportunity, I think those players' cards have been punched. I think it entirely depends on our transfer window. There will be opportunities for them to at least play if we do not get the quality in, and they need to fill a hole. I unfortunately think that the reason that they have been shipped out in whatever capacity they have pretty much should give them an indication that they do need to look elsewhere. Palmer's a funny one. I think he was okay in very short spells, but overall not consistent enough. I personally thought he had something. Tilio, I just don't think is going to get a chance. I really don't. I think his comments as well, saying that he found Scottish football difficult and all that, probably testifies that he's not going to get that chance. He's not quite the quality that we expect him to be. Look, I think with everything we were talking about Rodgers staying on and the centre back issue and stuff, I'm optimistic. I would like to think he might extend for a year or 18 months or something like that. But I think that is entirely hinged on whether we get into the Champions League. Because I think Ian's exactly right. This man wants to drive up his brand. He wants to show that he is a top class manager, and he will want to go on to a look, we're all fair here. He'll want to go on to a better league than the Scottish football. Whether that's Spain, probably would suit him quite well, but something like that. That's probably what he wants to do. He's not going to be able to do that realistically without getting some sort of attention and notoriety. And unfortunately, winning Scottish football every single year, as we have been recently, isn't giving him the notoriety that he deserves. So he's gonna have to do well in Europe, and I think for us we are kind of there. It's good that we're getting rid of some of this deadwood. We just need a couple of tweaks. I think if we looked at our Champions League season as probably where we were playing the best, we don't need much more than that. We need to replace a couple, and we need to add some extra talent, like a step up from what we have, and in a realistic sense. And then I think we'll be pretty competitive again. Sort of, I think we were probably going to finish somewhere between 10th and 15th in the Champions League at one point. So something like that would be a really good season for us. So the centre backs, good that we've gotten rid of those particular deadwood. I'm not sure about this Japanese lad. I don't really see him as being a replacement. Some of the other ones that we're touted to be signing, potentially better leagues, potentially better players. But for me personally, I've got to actually just give these players a chance and see what they're like. They're not big names, so.
So apparently, Johnny, there's Justin De Haas, he's a left-footed centre back from playing in Portugal at the moment, a Dutch guy. He's the one we're looking at to replace, to come in there and challenge, which is great. But you let Naroski go, who I thought was a good quality backup. So you think Brendan wants to play a right-sided centre back, a left-sided centre back together as a pair, right? But then you've got Carter Vickers, who's right, and then the next three guys you've got, if you have the Haas, you have Scales, and you got Trusty, they're all left-footed. who's your other right-sided centre back? You're going to play Dane Murray as Carter Vickers as backup? Is that what it's going to be? Because I left someone out. Inamura is also left-sided, so there's 4 of them. So I don't know.
We've played right-sided centre backs in the left-sided role. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I'm sure somebody else could say, look, it does have it is a big factor. I'm not sure how much of a factor you need where one has to be left-sided and one has to be right-sided. I can't imagine it being detrimental. You just need somebody who's competent in their positioning to be, that sort of mirror-sided, right? So if they're competent in that, it doesn't matter if they're naturally right-sided or left-sided. That's my guess. Whether it has to be left-sided and right-sided to be more efficient, who knows? But we've definitely made it work in the past. So,
Jared, I was going to say, right, just on that. Firstly, right, I mean, this is kind of modern football in a nutshell, really. But firstly, how you can be a professional footballer and not be able to use both feet is beyond me.
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing? Like, stacking shelves part time at Quicksave or something, so they can't work on the weaker foot. So that's a load of bollocks, right? But secondly, I mean, my era was the 80s, really, and the 90s, and go back to the sort of great Brian Clough with his centre halves. Can you head it? Can you kick it? Right, you'll do it for me. Left side and right sided centre halves and stuff like that. I think that it's much more of a requirement now because players are so bloody overcoached within an inch of their very being that they have to. These things have become really specific and really important. Whereas but before it's like your competency in terms of positioning, reading the game, like all the greatest defenders, like the Baresi's, Bobby Moores, Billy. It was the positional sense. They could read the game, so they could snuff out danger before it happened. It's much more of a reactive game now. So I think there's an over-reliance and an over-complicated. You look at the modern vernacular about the high press and all that kind of stuff, and the low block, and that's all been going on forever. It's just called something different. It's trying to give relevance to a new generation of football experts. But ultimately, I just like to see, like with Rocky, he was a defender. He could head it, he could kick it. Well, he didn't have any pace, but he was probably the best defender we had outside of Carter Vickers. So, I'd like to. I think that the way things seem to be going now, there's a bit more teams that are going a bit longer and sort of changing it up from that Guardiola ball. So maybe if people sort of calm down a little bit, cool their jets, we'll see less of a need to go for these kind of niche. He's got a left foot, he's got a right foot, he's got a middle foot, all this nonsense. So, my 2 cents worth.
I just think it's a joke as well. Like, at the end of the day, the footballers, like, why are we overcomplicating things? That's the biggest issue. Like, left side, right side, who cares? Like, as you're saying, Clough, perfect example. But I just think unless it's a specialist position like a winger, like this whole Kun who's on his way out, and we'll get into him now. But the fact that him being on that right wing, but always inverting onto his left foot, so making inverted wingers. And so then you've got Johnson bombing over him. It's like the first stint for Rodgers. You had Sinclair cutting in on his right from the left, and then you had Tierney bombing around him. You had that dynamic, right? But at the end of the day, shouldn't a winger be able to go inside, go outside? Remember watching Harry Kewell back in the day? He played on the left when he first debuted at Leeds, and he's skinning guys on the outside. He's beating guys on the inside. Giggs did the same thing at Man United. Beckham did the same thing. One of my favourite players growing up, Matt Letizia, not an athletic footballer at all, but boy would he make you look silly. David Ginola, same deal. Watching those sort of guys back in the 90s, sort of thing. Those are footballers. They're not athletes playing football, which is what a lot of these guys look like they are today. So I think that ties into what you're saying there, Ian, as well, whether it's a centre back or whatever. But it's going to be with Kun moving on. I think we get about £17 million for him, Johnny. So I think that's one of the main positions that we've got to strengthen. You touched on earlier about Champions League squad. We only needing a couple. Well, realistically, Jota's out until January. So I want Dazen to say it's striker. So then you'd have Dazen, you'd have Eder, and you'd have Callum Osmond as your third string striker. Johnny Kenny will probably be on his way. But then we need to bring in a couple of wingers, let's be honest, because the only options really we've got on the right at the moment, once Kun goes, is James Forrest. That's pretty much it.
I definitely think. Look, from reading into what Maeda said earlier weeks ago about how he would like to be played more through the centre forward. I'm happy to play winger when he wants. Blah blah blah. I do think winger is an area which we need to focus on in this transfer window. Kuhn moving on. Look, I think he was a very good player. I think he was very, very good when he was at his best. And I think we will definitely miss that type of quality. And I think there was a time there before Kuhn coming in where we had all these wingers. I'm thinking of the Palmers and the Yangs and everybody. Like we just seemed to sign these wingers and they were a bit of nothing. And then we got someone like Kuhn coming in, and he was actually a bit of energy and a bit of skill and stuff. Problem with it was his consistency. He was absolute. I think we can honestly say he down tools when in that January transfer window. Something's clearly happened. He wanted to move on. He sees Celtic as a stepping stone, as many players do. He's probably had an opportunity where he wanted to move on, and we weren't ready for him to do that. And it looked like he just chucked it because it was mental for his performances to go so downhill as much as they did. So I think that's good for us. I think if he doesn't want to be at Celtic, get rid of him. Como's probably in a better league, if we're all fair and stuff. So it's probably a step up for him for 6 months, maybe 8 months of consistency, getting 16 million. That's pretty all right. It's a shame. I think if he stayed on, he'd be much better. I just think that we need to replace that role. We need to replace the other wingers due to injuries. I think Forrest is coming to the end, right? We've said that for how many? 3 seasons now. He's definitely coming to the end. So we definitely need to continuously replace the winger position. That centre forward, what you just said off there, Jared, gives me absolutely no confidence whatsoever. Maeda, class. Everything else after that, fucking average. So we also need a decent centre forward, like actually a decent centre forward that can come on. And I'm talking about the days when we had Kyogo and Giakoumakis, 2 class centre forwards, both doing different things. You knew what you were getting. That's the position we need to be in with centre forwards. And then we can talk about other roles as well. But yeah, wingers. I don't think it's the end of the world. Kuhn moving on. We need to sign wingers. So yeah, all in all, could be a good thing as long as we sign and reinvest that money.
So I'll bring up a comment here from John Cairns. He goes, I'm tired of selling 20, 40 million pound players and paying 2 to 6 to replace it. We got lucky with some extra funds for a couple, but exception rather than the rule. And the thing is, we've got like 8-point-something million or 7.7 millions come in for Frimpong. We got another sell on from someone else. We're getting 17 million for Kuhn. And the fact of the matter is, with the players that we're being linked with, you got Balikwisha. Apparently, that's with the agent. The club have all agreed. It's just up to him to agree for like 5.1 million pound for him. And then Andre Orsaceta, who we were linked with last season as well. Apparently, that talks back up as well. If you brought both of them in as a double rammer on the right there, that fills that position. Then there's Isaac Janssen, who is another guy we're being linked with. You bring that in, that's great, but Nigrin's not going to be playing as a winger. I don't care what you say. He's not a winger. He's too slow for that position. So he'll be in the middle of the park. And you think the number 8 top that he's taken, you'd hope that that's a sign that he's going to be in the middle of the park. So for me, I think we need 2 wingers definitely. And then on the left, we've got options because Callum Osman can play on the left wing and play as a striker. So that could potentially be your backup if need be. If you're going to play Maeda as a left winger until Jota's back, and you've got Osman backing him up. But then, yes, Johnny, as you said, we need a striker. So it's all moving shit around basically at the moment. But we're in a flux. But we definitely need 2 wingers, a striker, another centre back, and a backup left back. They're the positions for me that I think we need as a focus. And then if we feel like getting a little bit fancy here, get us a big, massive bastard number 6 who'll go out and just smack people and break legs. That'd always be handy too for the Champions League.
I was saying that the other day actually. I like a Joe Linton type player. at Newcastle. Obviously, if we could actually get the real Joe Linton, that would be wonderful, but that's never going to happen. But like a Joe Linton type number 6. And I'd also as well, before we signed Engels, do you know Derek Ray, the commentator, the Scottish guy? He's a German football expert. He said before we signed Engels that he had loads of potential stuff, but he said his position is number 6. And I think that's correct. I think that's where he's got a really good passing range, but I think he's a natural number 6. Yeah. But what was the question?
No, don't worry about that. I want to go in on that, what you just said,
Yeah.
because Engels is a 6, yes, agree. But then what's Bernardo? Because he played as a 6 for the Portuguese under-21 national team. And I find when you put Engels and Bernardo on together, we're just duplicating shit in the middle of the park. So is Engels a 6, or would you play Bernardo in a 6? What do you think? I just want to go down this tangent here.
Bernardo said that he was more of an attacking player, and it kind of belied what our eye tests as fans sort of said in the his first season, I think. But I think he looks a bit like Matt O'Reilly, and his gait, the way he runs and stuff like that, is a lot like Matt O'Reilly as well. Similarly to like Kuhn's gait, natural gait is a lot like Paddy Roberts, and he looked a bit like Paddy Roberts as well. But do you know what I mean? So I think if it was me, if it was a choice in the number 6, it would be Engels, and I'd play Bernardo in a more advanced role.
What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, look, I think probably my concern is that I think Engels has got a big season. Whether that's a 6 or wherever, I think he's probably got a big season. I think last season he did good. He put in good shifts. He just didn't really bring. Talk about Matt O'Reilly. He didn't bring the Matt O'Reilly factor, right? He didn't really have that extra special stuff that we kind of need. He just did consistently good shifts. But with the price tag that he's on, I think with the age that he is, he just needs to now settle and really push forward. Even as inconsistent as he is, but when Hatate's fantastic, when he's good, he's fantastic, and he really gives you those sort of extra special games. And I think that's what Engels needs. And if he needs to drop into a 6 to give us, better distribution or just give better performance and stuff, then yeah, look, I'm fine with that. Like I'm not really sure I'm bothered where he plays. I just need to see that push. And I think Bernardo's had, again, games where he's played fantastically. And if he wants to play more attackingly, then great. But our whole midfield next season need to step it up, I think. I think everyone around McGregor are just okay. I think that needs to be improved. At the moment, it's solid-ish and kind of still rough and a bit raw, and that's a big season for them next season. Whatever that 3 is, I have no idea.
Speaking of the midfield, Johnny, for me, I think the biggest adjustment we need to make is instead of playing 1 6 and 2 8s, I think we need to go back to Rodgers' first stint with 2 6s and a 10. And then basically what you'll do is one of the 6s can push forward that bit, which could be Kelmack and Engels side by side. And then once that happens and they square and you do that, you've got one guy pushing forward, one holding, and then you've got the guy in behind the striker in the Rogic role. That's what we're missing. That's the sort of role that would work for Bernardo. That's the sort of role that's going to work for Nigren. That's the sort of thing where it means Kelmack doesn't have to do as much running. It means that will allow Engels to play as a 6 in his natural position, but still get out there and do a bit. So it's that's what I think we're going to need to happen. But Robert Gibson, I have to bring up this comment. We need a Paul Breitner type. He was a lovely German leg breaker with a mad mustache. 100%. Get it in. Get us one of those ones. And yeah, Andrew's saying, yep, 2 6s and a 10. I think that's what we need to do. And then that will allow our wingers to actually have the space to come in and out either side as well. So I think that's how we need to rebalance our midfield. But yeah, we'll see what Rodgers does.
I think you've all made a good point. I think we might see us reverting back to that formation. I mean, I think Rodgers probably kept 4-3-3 going because that was Ange's system that worked so well, and you don't really want to change it up too much. So I think you probably will see that. If I'm 4-2-3-1 sort of thing. But we could see that far more often next season, and it did work for us well in like Europe. That the years I'm thinking of against the Leipzigs and stuff, and like Europa League or whatever it was. So it worked well. So we could definitely go back to that.
The funny thing with those two variations that you're saying there, Johnny, a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-3-3 are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, they are.
Only difference is where your wingers start. Are they up level with your striker pressing, or are they holding back level with your number 10? That's the only difference. So it's actually not much of a difference at all. You've got some comments here. So Andrew Galea is saying 3-5-2. And everyone's been talking about this since Rodgers come back because he played it at Leicester. Heavy Vibes are saying the same thing, 3-5-2. If that's why we're stockpiling centre backs, that makes sense. Because if we went a 3-5-2 and you had Tierney as your left centre back, and then you had two other centre backs there, and then the rumours of Robbo coming in from Liverpool, play him at left back, Inamura's backing up that. I'm just going off on absolute fancy here. Like, it's not going to happen. I know what Celtic's like, everyone, okay? Just clarifying. But say if you had someone like that and Johnson is your wing backs, and you had three there, and then you had your three in the middle and two up front, so you could have Eder and Eder and Maida together up front as a big man, little man combo. That could actually work, but I don't see Rodgers doing that. Let's be honest. He's looking at going, my contract's up at the end of the season. I don't want to go risking it, doing something like that, and people think I've lost the plot and then get a shit job next year. So I can't. That's the only reason I won't see him changing anything, because he's put himself in the market window.
I think 3-5-2 can also be really passive. It can be quite. It's quite a negative mentality sometimes, and I think he probably played it at Leicester so often because Leicester were really, really struggling in a very, very high quality league. So you really needed to not, concede goals. So I mean, 3-5-2 can very easily slip into 5-3-2, and it's it can be very negative in that sense. So I don't see him doing that with Celtic, where we are in the opposite end. We are, we're attacking in the sort of central and final third. And then in Europe, you're not really going to change the system too much. And it would be proper negative to do that in Europe as well. You want to go and make a statement. So I don't see him doing 3-5-2 very often, if at all.
We'll give the final thought on this topic to you, Ian.
Well, I mean, opposite Martin O'Neill vibes, the 3-5-2. I'd like to see it, but I mean, I think you're right there, Johnny. If it can be a defensive sort of formation, but I think with Celtic, it really would be. So therefore, I think those wing backs are able to stretch the pitch and just bomb up and down, as they did under O'Neill. And sort of bomb up on the outside or even tuck in. And allow the midfielders to advance further up. So I wouldn't mind seeing that, but I think Jared, I tend to agree. I don't think he would change it too much. But then, if he does end up not winning the league, and it's kind of the turgid, boring football, and I don't, it's kind of happened that way because other people they know how we play. That's how the Rangers have beaten us in the past few Glasgow derbies, because they've worked out a way to nullify what we do. It's not like it's a secret. Yeah, and how Aberdeen won the cup final, we smashed them only 2 or 3 weeks before that, so they had time to regroup, and they saw St Mirren nullify us, and they saw a lot of our players just phoning it in. So I think the squad needs a refreshment. So if we're going to change a formation, it needs some new personnel. But maybe that with a change of formation, it might freshen them up, prevent players from becoming stale and hearing that same old tired, trusted message, that's happening every season with the rigid 4-4-3 that we've come to sort of get used to.
So I'm going to bring up a couple of comments here. Heavy Vibes is saying 3-5-2 in Scotland, 4-2-3-1 in Europe. Then Robert Gibson says to that, we don't need to stack the midfield domestically. It's more for Europe with our team. And then Andrew Galea responds to these going 3-5-2 allows you to play attacking wingers against poor opposition and wing backs against good opposition. So it makes sense. But yeah, I'll just go to a comment here, and then we'll go to talking about the rest of the league, and then we'll wrap the pod up there. So I want to go with John Cairns' question at the end of the pod. So just remind me that we've got that in there. But Pegleg's saying Brendan is already coming out with the board's mantra of players that fit the profile. They don't have any intention of spending decent money. If that happens, Rogers will leave. Now, Rogers is also talking up about the youth players a lot as well, trying to bring guys through. So it could be an interesting thing to see how that all works. But another one here is Pork Chop Express is saying Mexican standoff between Brendan and the biscuit tin. Who blinks first?
Good point.
So, yeah, what we'll do is we will go to a quick little chat about the rest of the league. Like, Ian, you touched on it early on about what Rangers are doing. Like, they actually look to have some sort of sensible guy managing them, and the sort of players that they're bringing in, their fans are already booing. They're not happy, but they think they should be spending, every cent they don't have. But I think they might have the right people there finally to be sustainable. But the thing is, you mentioned Tony Bloom early on, and I actually see him involved with Hearts as being they're going to become a bigger issue for clubs like us before Rangers under old mate Vegan Boy will. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the just the Scottish League in general?
I mean, this is the first time that, since their inception, as I said before, the Rangers, excuse me. So the reason that they have, I suppose, challenged Celtic is because they've had kind of soft loans from directors, pumping money into a club that they couldn't afford it. So it was again, they were just doing what the old club did, and so that's now going to stop. You've got a group of owners that have come in, or majority shareholders that have come in, who want to run the club sustainably, and they want to obviously sell it on, I'm sure, at some point for a profit. So that's going to be a slow burner. So they're going to have investment, but they're going to have stability for the first time ever. So I think that's obviously going to be a big threat to us, because there's some sensible people running the show now. Similarly with Hearts, they've got obviously. I mean, I'm surprised this hasn't happened in the past, whereby these owners now, the American owners, they're going to see this as a pathway to bring in and blood players from other leagues into this league, and then maybe sort of farm them out to their other clubs in the EPL. I can see that happening at Hearts, and Hibs also. So the more American owners, especially, we're getting, I think I can see that cycle happening. So I think I agree with you. I think Tony Bloom's, it's 10 million. That's not going to go having to go on infrastructure. That's going to be mainly on the pitch. Whereas Rangers, 20 million, I think a lot of that is going to have to go to sort of be spent on infrastructure, at least half of it. And with Hibs, I think Bill Foley, I think he's shown down at Bournemouth that he kind of knows what he's doing. The fact that they got rid of O'Neill, who was doing all right, and then they brought Areola. It was similar to what Southampton did years ago when they brought in who was the guy, Pochettino. No one had heard of him, and they went and got him in, and it was kind of, it really sparked Southampton into a good run for a bit. And then obviously he went on a bigger and better things. So I think there's a lot of sense that's happening. They know how to run businesses, they know how to make money. So, and you're not going to make money when the club's a basket case. So I think the league is getting stronger. So we need to make sure that we stay ahead of it. We stay ahead of that, because as I said, I think the threat is really tangible, and it might not be this season, but certainly the season after that. If we're asleep at the wheel, the term I used before, which is what we're most adept at doing, we're going to get a smack on the arse.
And Johnny, what are your thoughts?
Look, I think I am certainly positive overall with the state of Scottish League and stuff, and I think Ian's completely correct when he talks about like the stability at Rangers now. I think it will 100% be a slow burner. I don't think they're going to have like a dramatic turnaround in a season or two. The way that they're going to run it is exactly right. They're going to run it correctly, which is developing players, selling them at a profit as soon as they possibly can, and then buying in and getting cheap players and repeating the process, rinse and repeat sort of thing. And that's going to take a long time for them to get out of the mess that they've been in. They're still in heaps amount of debt. It's going to be a really big. It's going to be such a slow burner. My concern with Scottish football, I guess, overall is I think, at least in the short term, I definitely feel there's going to be a restriction. I think Celtic is so hamstrung by the quality of other teams and their performances in their respective European competition, as well as the national team. We are now in a position where we're going to have to do playoffs. We're going to have to do a playoff to get into the Champions League. And I think if I'm right, the season after that, it's like 2 qualifying. And then I think it could really get into risky territory where we just keep falling down that national coefficient, where we could just be doing the entire qualifying again. I think that is on the horizon for us in the short term. And I think, look, don't get me wrong, I think some of the quality that you see from the Scottish players playing in the Italian leagues and stuff, I think we could see the national team getting better again, getting back into winning form. I just want our domestic teams to be doing as best as they possibly can in that Conference League or potentially Europa, really pushing forward. And that could happen with all these American owners. They could see a scenario where for them to sell their players at a profit, that they really need to be advertising their players on that global stage, which means focusing on that European competition. Whereas I think as previously it's been seen as such a bonus or an unattainable achievement. So why bother? And now that might change. I definitely see though that restriction in the short term. Long term though, I do think we're still on that up and up. But I think that implicates Celtic, and it could be problematic for somebody like Rodgers staying on long term. If he's like, well, absolutely screw that. I'm not doing those qualifiers. That's such a, it's a lottery almost sometimes.
On that, Johnny, I'm going to say we kind of need, as you said, we need those teams and the other things to qualify and get points and add to the coefficient pots, right? So if we're qualifying now and the Scottish national team is sitting at a certain point, now coefficient points are at a certain level, it's not going to help Celtic. And we can go in and have a great season in Europe like we did this year and build our coefficient points. But at the end of the day, once these Rangers points from their Europa League final run a few years ago fall off in a year or two, it's gonna be brutal. So the next 2 years are gonna be absolutely has to be improved on. Teams have to do well. We have to keep those points, make them up. Whether it's us, whether it's Rangers going another run in the Europa League, whether it's Hearts or whoever qualify and actually make the Conference League and do well there themselves, and everyone's got to do their bit. So fingers crossed. But what we'll do is I'm going to go to John Cairns' question to finish the pod. So he goes, hey, lads, if you had £50 million to spend to build a side for the UCL, who are the 3 to 4 players you'd bring in with our current salary restrictions? Also, what players would you consider moving on outside of those that have? Do you want some thinking time? Because I've got a couple ready to go. I read that early on. So I knew I was coming back to it.
No, you go, Jared. No, I don't. Yeah, go for it.
So first thing I'd be looking at doing is, if he hasn't signed his contract at Norwich, I'd be saying, fist guarding, get your ass up here already. Here's the money, bang, slap it down. We'll get a £15 million sort of striker. That's what we need, right? So 3 players at 15 million and 1 at 5. There you go. There's your 4 players. I'd be looking for Trusty would be one I'd be moving on, and I'd be bringing in a top quality guy to partner with Carter Vickers. I'd be looking for a good number 6, and I'd be looking for that. And then a couple of wingers we're already talking about. But yeah, I'd be looking to get a couple of £10 million wingers if possible. I don't know exactly who the players are, but that's the sort of breakdown how I'd spend the money. But Trusty would be gone. And then at the end of the day, I'd probably move someone out of the midfield. This is going to sound a little controversial, but I'd probably be selling Bernardo.
Well, I would do something that the board would love on face value, right? I would go for is it Vindelof? Is the one that's just been released from Man United? Victor Lindelof. Lindelof. So I'd go him for the left centre back. I'd also go for Ericsson, who's just been released for the Champions League as a midfielder. I think he'd be a kind of a good wild card. And I'd also go for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who's just been left Everton. So that money could be invested into the wages. Obviously, you'd have to. Our wage structure is outdated, and it's like typical of, like, when you've got like a billionaire owner who's an old guy who thinks, "Oh, that's really expensive." It's like, well, no, it's not expensive for modern times. Maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago when you took over the club, that was a lot of money. But especially after hyperinflation and that kind of stuff, it's not. So the salary ceiling has to be raised anyway. But I think all those guys on freeze. I think Lindelof's the captain of Sweden. We've got a great track record of having sort of Swedish Scandinavian players. I don't think the shout on Fiskgarden is a bad one, but I certainly think Calvert-Lewin I think he's the third top goal scorer in Everton's Premier League history. But he looks a good player. Whether he'd come to Celtic, I don't know, but maybe Champions League, the full of Champions League might be all right, even just for a season. And then he goes on to pastures new. But I think those three, and maybe Robertson as well as cover for Kieran.
I'm going to change one of mine. I'm going to bring in Josh Doig. Bring him back from Italy. And then we go that 3-5-2 in Europe and have Tierney as your left centre back with Doig outside of him. There you go. Bit more thinking time got me there.
Look, I kind of inclined to agree with you, Jared. I think I'd get rid of a few players and replace those positions with somebody. I think the £10 million player at the moment is what a £5 million player was 5 years ago, if that. So I really don't think 10 million gets us an awful lot now. So if I had 50 million, maybe if I really wanted to push the boat out, sort of a 15 million pound player, something like that, along those lines of sort of like quality that we otherwise wouldn't get. I think you're right. I think Trusty would be going for me. Some other players, Super Bernardo would be the same. Scales would be the same. Look, I'm being honest here. Ida would be the same for me. Yeah. These are players that I really do think don't really push us forward. Honestly, Hatate's not far there. Like he's very, very hit and miss for me. Like when he's great, he's fantastic and unplayable. But when he's not really up for it, we need far more consistency in the middle. Look, I think somebody like a Jesse Lingard might not be awful. Old, not at the end of his career, but I don't think would be an awful replacement to have as a backup striker or a backup wing or something like that. But overall, I personally don't love those. I think Lingard's still got loads of quality, but I'm the sort of aging, retiring players, not exactly part of Celtic's. I don't want it to be Celtic's business plan moving forward. I just think he's still a good player. There's a lot of okay players at Celtic I would move on, and I would try to hopefully replace with sort of the young 10 to 15 million pound player across Europe.
Can I just jump in? Sorry to jump in there, mate, right? Just about Ida, right? I think Ida's getting a bit of stick. He gets a lot of stick. And I think the one thing that he went against me for Ida was he was talking like an EPL player. I know he's Irish, but that kind of like bigging himself up after scoring 20 goals. And 20 goals is all right, but he was saying, "Oh, it's amazing," and all that kind of stuff. It's not amazing. You should be thinking that's the bare minimum I've got from the bench.
Yeah.
And he should be saying, I'll do better. You're playing for Celtic. So I think if he might, that might just been a defence mechanism, and he was sort of saying that, just to sort of underline the fact that it was actually not a bad return, considering he was coming from the bench by and large. But what I'd love to see is maybe a former player, someone like Larsson or Frank McAvenny or somebody, coming in and spending time with Adam Ida and working on what he can improve on. It's not like he couldn't do it, because I think he's got all the ingredients to be a really top striker. When we look at Harry Kane, when all the loans he had, but he had the mentality to go out and turn himself. I don't think naturally he was that type of player. Turn himself into a wall beater. Now, I'm not saying Adam Ida's going to do that, but he's got the potential to get far more, ratchet it up a good few steps to get more out of him. But it's in his head. and he's got to have the desire to want to do it. So saying, like, glorifying himself by saying, "Oh well, it was unbelievable that I got 20 goals a season," that's just that. Maybe that's a little arrow to your detractors, but a club like Celtic, and for the fans, we demand. You're doing everything. We're doing something we would love to be doing, but obviously always we're shit and you're not. So let's maximise what you can get out of yourself on a platform that you're never going to get anywhere else playing for a club like Celtic, domestically and in Europe. So I don't know if Brendan would go for it, but I'd love to see, like Harry Kewell did it with Maeda. He spent that time one-on-one. Harry Kewell, what a player he was, as you touched on before. Class winger. And he spent time and energy on Maeda. And then when Maeda was scoring goals, he was running over to the bench and celebrating with him. I think that a similar scenario would work with Adam Ida.
Okay, I'm going to say something about Ida. Like, I rate him. I think he's a good player. But I honestly think Ida would work better. And Andrew Galea's comment here, Rodgers' system does strikers no favour. I'm not pointing the finger at Rodgers, but I look at the way Ida plays, and I think under a Neil Lennon type of manager, he would be a hell of a lot more prolific and would make a bigger impact on our squad day in, day out, game in, game out than he does in this current system and this current team. That's my take on him. I think he's the right player in the wrong system at the moment.
God, just on like Rodgers' system, right? If we're being fair, and I might be misremembering when Rodgers exactly overlapped, but since Larson, our three best strikers has been under a Rodgers system.
Who?
Dembele, Edouard, and Kyogo. So I like they're some of the three best strikers we've possibly had, all played in a Rodgers system. I don't think it's necessarily how Rodgers wants strikers to play. I think.
Sorry, mate, go on. No, don't you think that with Kyogo, it was better under and I think it kind of went down under
absolutely, absolutely. He's 100% still scored goals. Still one of our best players. It's not. It's. I don't necessarily think that we could not have a very, very decent, high quality striker under a Rodgers system. I think you're right. I think it's in Ida's head. I'm not ready to write him off, but like, man, he's got to develop. Like he's really got to come along. Like ignore the price tag, because the price tag's what you get for buying from an English team, whatever. That's just it is what it is, right? Like it's the price. When we watch him, he is okay most of the time and not good enough to get regular first team football. Like we only really play him when Maeda needs to go out on the wing because we've got nobody else. You're absolutely right. It's in his head. You can see he's nearly there. He scores the hard goals and consistently misses the ones that are just sitters. So he just needs to come on. He just needs to develop a bit. I think great idea getting sort of consultants in and whoever it is, Larson, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Getting consultants in and just working on individual players and developing them to that next stage that should just be part of Celtic's business model all the time. But yeah, we don't do that.
So what you're saying, Johnny, about Edouard and about Dembele, yep, I get it. I think Kyogo played better under Ange, where it was one touch, the ball went wide, the wingers put the crosses in and he just tapped it in. And as Andrew's saying here, when wingers are cutting in all the time, it breaks the strikers' hearts because, yes, it brings another defender into where they're making their runs and where they're positioning themselves. So I'm not blaming Rodgers' system. I'm just saying Ida doesn't work best in Rodgers' system. That's what I was saying.
He's a big lad. I know, but he's a big lad and he should be pushing defenders off quite easily.
He hasn't got the physicality that Dembele had. I remember seeing Dembele at a petrol station in Glasgow. Right, honestly, he was putting air in his tyres. It was like proper man mountain, and you could just see, And I remember he came on when he see a game against Partick Thistle. I think we were drawing 1-1, and he brought Dembele on, and he just bossed it, and he ended up getting the winner. So I think he's physicality wise. I think obviously mentality wise as well. I think he's far greater. And I think he's had about 50 odd games for Tottenham, hadn't he? At a young age, not for Fulham. Sorry, at a young age, before he came to Celtic. Whereas Ida was obviously a lower level with Norwich and wasn't always. I think he started a lot on the bench actually at Norwich. So I think he's got, as I said before, I think he's got the ingredients, but it's down to him whether he screws or not and sees the opportunity he's got, because he's only got this season, I think.
No,
It's
that's right.
pretty-
He has the ingredients. You're right. He has the quality. Just
It's
needs to
pretty-
put
it's-
it through.
Sorry, Johnny. It's pretty simple for me with the way he needs to play. He needs to be able to lead up into that false nine, play the wingers in, turn, make his runs, and get his head on the end of it or get his foot on the end of it, right? So the perfect mentors for him would be get him talking to Chris Sutton, get him talking to John Hartson. If you can get Big Pierre on the phone to him, those are the three guys straight off the top of my head. That's the sort of player. They're the people that need to we talk through, look at some footage with him and go, see how you went this side of the defender. There you should be faking away and coming near post. There you should be faking near post, going back post. Our wingers, that's the part he needs to focus on, that build-up play, and that will open him up in the box. And and then if he does that build-up and plays his wingers in wide, then they're not going to get in his way, are they?
I think sure that Paul John at Axom, I think when they put a night on with Big Pierre, and I think he said that night Big Pierre said his dream would be to go and coach at Celtic. So
There
I
it
think
is.
the office
There
there,
it
you know, I think I didn't think about Pierre there, but that just popped back into my head there. He would be perfect, just showing him, you know, teaching him the Jedi.
There it is. Bang. I think that's a perfect spot to finish it. It's the most sense we've spoken all pod. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this Chinwag. We'll be back probably, I don't know, in a week, 2 weeks. We'll figure out when we're going to be back into the regular routine. But yeah, just thanks for sticking around the channel, joining us tonight. We appreciate it. So thanks to Ian and John for joining me, and hail, hail.
Hail, hail.